Items are a pretty integral part of Zelda, and one that a lot of the games have struggled to get right. Some games, like Breath of the Wild, are critiqued for having too few items. Others, like Twilight Princess, have way too many that end up being extremely niche and only getting used a handful of times. In this video, I'd like to take a look at all the items in Ocarina of Time and rank them from worst to best. The list will only include items that are equipable and aren't just a default item, cancelling items like the Master Sword and Green Tunic. Consumables will also be ignored. The list will be ranked in terms of enjoyability of the item, its usefulness outside its own dungeon if it is a dungeon item, and just how much I personally like it. This is by no means an objective list, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts or top 5 down below. If you liked this video and would like to see the items from the other games ranked, please show support by dropping a like or sub and ringing the bell. If you want to let me know what you think directly or give me video ideas, come tell me on Twitter or in my Discord. Links are in the description. And with no further delay, on to the list. Number 29. Hover Boots. The simulation of slipping around on ice is easily the worst part of most video game winter or ice levels, and I'm utterly baffled as to why somebody at Nintendo thought translating that feeling into its own item would be a good idea. I dread having to use it. They look stupid and they handle even worse. Absolutely the worst item in the game, maybe the series. Number 28, Goron Tunic. This is a very stylish garment, and it gets points for that, but it doesn't really do anything. Prior to getting it, you can already enter the hot areas it protects you from, you just lose a lot of health. The Goron Tunic is basically a wearable dungeon key. Plus, Link looks way better in blue. Number 27, Zora Tunic. Again, the tunics just don't really do much, which is why they're so low on the list, but the Zora Tunic is a bit more engaging. While the Goron Tunic just lets you stop losing health in areas that you can already go into, the Zora Tunic prevents you from drowning and dying. Plus, the Goron Tunic is only really mandatory in a select few dungeon-related spots, whereas the Zora Tunic can be used to explore Lake Hylia, and it looks way cooler. Number 26, Fairy Ocarina. The ocarina is a very cool item, and this has a lot of goodwill attached to it because I love Saria, but Link callously disregards it the moment his new waifu gives him a better one, so I will too. Number 25, Broken Giant's Knife. Look, it might be silly that this is even on the list at all, let alone not in last place, but personal enjoyment is factored into the list, and I have spent hours of my youth going through the later portions of the game using only the Broken Giant's Knife as a weapon. It's a fun challenge. Alas, I admit the item is pretty useless, so for that, it doesn't even enter the top 20. Number 24. Iron Boots. The Iron Boots have a bad reputation thanks to associations with the Water Temple and how unbelievably tedious it was to constantly have to go into the inventory to equip and unequip them, something you do with great frequency in the Water Temple. Obviously, I am sympathetic to these criticisms, seeing as it isn't even in my top 20. However, I think the Iron Boots look very cool, and the sound that plays when you walk in them feels like it scratches an itch in my brain. Number 23, Lens of Truth. The Lens of Truth is actually a very cool item, especially as a lore guy, and it is implemented very cleverly when used. It just simply rarely gets used, and it isn't really applicable to general use. It helps that it's loot from a side dungeon as opposed to a main dungeon, but I can't justify putting it much higher with how little it's actually used outside the Shadow Temple. Number 22, Fairy Slingshot. I have deep nostalgia for the first dungeon item in Ocarina of Time, and the first dungeon item I got as a Zelda fan, as Ocarina was my first game. That is the sole reason this item is so high, because really, it's just a child's bow. Number 21, Magic Beans. These were such a cool idea. Bury them as a kid and then utilize them as an adult. It's so fun to try and remember where the bean patches are after the time skip. Grinding them out for your heart pieces and chests can be tedious if you leave them to the end in a 100% run, but if you plant them as you go, finding them can be hugely rewarding. They inch into the top 20, however their specific use keeps them from going any higher. Number 20, Deku Shield. The Deku Shield gets big points for looking so cool and thematic, and of course being a shield, it is super useful and versatile. It's just a fact that it's only in use for at most 3 dungeons before it's phased out by an objectively better shield, and it's potentially only being used for the Deku tree if the player gets the Hylian Shield early. That, and it's flammable, and I've very rarely made it through to Dongo's Cavern without having to buy a new one. Number 19. Deku Stick. This item is surprisingly versatile, being used as a child to solve puzzles and fight enemies. It doesn't get use after adulthood, however, and other items do both the puzzle solving and fighting better. But it gets to be number 19 purely on the hilarious amount of damage it does, and the fact that you can kill Gamma in about a nanosecond with it, which is always a classic. Number 18. Boomerang. This item is plenty useful once you get it, being used for puzzle solving and combat. Really, the Boomerang is the quintessential perfect Zelda item. Why then is it not even in the top 15? Well, it's because you get to use it to solve a couple puzzles and then beat the boss, and then never use it again as you immediately become an adult and lose access to it. Definitely a lot of missed potential there. Number 17. Pharaohs Wind. This is where the list gets pretty subjective, since I understand that Pharaohs Wind isn't really that useful of an item. The limit to use in dungeons is understandable but very restricting, as it would be tremendously useful to have an anytime teleport to, say, the Bowkeeper, but I suppose that would leave it open to abuse in the timed sections of the trading sequence. However, the reason this item is so high up despite its restriction is because I really like how it looks. The actual item, its representation once cast, and its casting aura all look very pretty. That's it. I'm sorry. Number 16. The Fairy Bow. The Fairy Bow is the first item found as an adult, and it's heavily used afterwards. It feels good to use, and it's implemented pretty cleverly in puzzles. This is the first item I consider to be great, and the rest are using the bow as the bar for being a good item. And fittingly enough, we have entered the top 15. Number 15. Hylian Shield. This is probably the most famous item on this list. The Hylian Shield is so renowned and beloved that despite being the default item in Ocarina, it's a rare piece of treasure in Breath of the Wild. That is enough to get it to the top 15 alone, and I would understand somebody who wanted it to go higher. However, this is the list of items in Ocarina compared to other items in its own game, and because of that, I can't justify putting it higher. It isn't even the coolest shield in Ocarina. Number 14. Light Arrows. This is another placement I understand is completely subjective. The light arrows are the last item you receive, but truthfully, if this list was completely subjective, the arrows would probably be in second or third place. I love using them that much, and to me they are the payoff for beating the game. As you'll learn, I have a huge thing for bright colorful lights, and the bright yellow the arrows create are just beautiful. The fight against Ganon is already incredibly poignant, as the battlefield is so shrouded in darkness that Ganon is just about a silhouette, and only the occasional blast of lightning reveals him. Then a gorgeous streak of yellow light, and an explosion of light in the dark. I think the fight against Ganon is one of the best looking scenes in the entire N64 library, and the light arrows hugely enhance it. Number 13. The Hookshot. The Hookshot and Longshot are kind of examples of the perfect item. You get them as soon as you become an adult and use them constantly through your entire journey. They feel satisfying to use, and they have uses outside their primary purpose. A lot of other items are super cool but barely get use outside of their dungeons, and others are practical and used all the time but just don't really warrant any attention. The Hookshot strikes the perfect balance between frequent use and engagement. The only reason the Hookshot isn't higher is because I don't think it excels in either use or enjoyability. It's the perfect Zelda item, but it isn't my favorite. Number 12. The Bomb. The bomb is alongside the bow and boomerang as the quintessential Zelda item, and I think it has one of its best outings in Ocarina of Time. And Nintendo was expertly clever in introducing it the way they did. Before you get the bombs, you have to rely on grabbing the ones from the bomb flowers, being restricted to using them where the flowers are and being on a timer from the moment you pick them up, as an explosion is coming shortly. You're stuck with this restriction for long enough for it to make its point, but not long enough to overstay its welcome. And as a result, when you get the bomb bag and can collect your own bombs, it feels like an accomplishment. Like, hell yeah, no more dumb bomb flowers for me. Then, not only does the bomb continue to be used through the entire game, but you remember that you can even backtrack to the Great Deku Tree to bomb some walls there. The bomb is an amazing item. Number 11. Giant's Knife. I love the Giant's Knife as a temporary upgrade before getting the big Goron sword, and for giving us the broken Giant's Knife, which is surprisingly fun. But the reason it is so high up in this list is because I find the method to get it to be so clever. Having to talk to the Goron as a child, being told it's going to take years to complete, and then receiving the item as an adult is such a clever way of contextualizing the time skip. Maybe it's cheating to place the item so high on the list based on the factors around it as opposed to the item itself, but oh well, it's my list. And we're on to the top 10. Each of these items are ones that I love generally and that I specifically love the utilization of in Ocarina of Time. Number 10. Bomb Chew. All the utility of a bomb in the shape of an adorable mouse. These weapons rank this high purely because they are an absolute blast to use.
Brother, this guy stinks!
While scenarios specifically requiring the use of the bomb chew are scant, they are useful in a wide range of puzzles and can often replace an arrow or equivalent item. Plus, bomb chews allow us to access my favorite Ocarina of Time minigame, Bomb Chew Bowling. Definitely not the best item, and that's why it isn't higher, but it's a personal favorite. Number 9. Deku Note. This list is obviously beginning to get highly subjective, and the Deku Note is here purely because I love it. It is obviously, like the Bomb Chew, another optional item that is in no way mandatory, but I love the Deku Note and I use it at just about every given opportunity. The flash it makes, the satisfying blue hue the enemies become when they're stunned, the noise it makes upon impact, it's just mwah. They do make some fights trivially easy, but I'd say that's a point in their favor. Plus, I mean, the Deku Note is so badass that it can even be used against Ganon. How cool is that? Versatile and endlessly useful, the Deku Nuts earn their spot. Number 8. The Mirror Shield. The Mirror Shield is the best shield. It serves the same purpose as the Hylian Shield, plus being able to reflect light, so it's just a better shield. But the reason that it's so high is purely, shamelessly, because of how damn stylish it is. The gray tinted mirror and the deep red of the frame look amazing, and its sharp angles cut a tremendously memorable image. Smack the Gerudo logo on it and you got an incredibly stylish shield. And what's more, it looks great matching the red tunic and contrasting with the blue. Plus, it's in Soul Calibur, so... Number 7. Ocarina of Time. The Ocarina of Time is an incredibly important item for a bevy of reasons. It serves as the titular item, it replaces Link's previous ocarina, it represents Link's progression from Sheltered Village Boy to Hero of Time, and it allows him access to all the temple songs. It's probably the most memorable item on this list. Number 6. Ice Arrows. Look, I know that this item will catch me some slack since it's above dozens of incredible items and it's an optional, barely useful arrow upgrade. But I love items with combat use, and the Ice Arrow is basically a Deku Nut that does damage. How can I not love that? Plus, again, the particle effects look really good, and I'm easily swayed by pretty particle effects. Sue me. And with that, we enter my top 5. This is the point where this ranking becomes completely subjective. In fact, I think that my top 1 and 2 will be quite controversial. But I love all of these items. I look forward to getting them every time I start a new game, and they are absolutely the top 5 Ocarina of Time items. Number 5. Fire Arrows. Fire arrows are literally just the ice arrow, but better. It does decent damage, and it looks super cool. Plus, Young Link uses them in Smash. But above all that, they are a super versatile item in dungeons. I swear damn near every temple has a torch that needs to be lit or something to be burned away, and the fire arrow lets you do that from the other side of the room without having to waste a ton of magic with Din's fire. Number 4, Nehru's Love. Here it is, my namesake. The channel started off as Nehru's Love before I shortened it to just Nehru, and that's where the S in my Twitter handle comes from. Nehru is of course my favorite goddess, but above that, I really love Nehru's Love. I've always been a fairly uncoordinated person, and as a result I'm actually pretty terrible at video games despite them being my primary hobby. And Nehru's Love is a large part of what let me get through some of the tougher endgame fights as a kid. The crystal effect is so cool, I love the casting animation. Honestly, the only reason it isn't in number 1 for me is because you get it so late in the game and it barely gets any use. But all the same, I couldn't be prouder to be named after such a cool item. Number 3. The Bottle. What can be said about the greatness of the humble bottle? Is it the way it glistens as it spins in the light? Or perhaps the vibrancy with which the potions within exude? Perhaps its use as a tiny house for the little fishy or the small buggy fella? Or perhaps as a holding facility for the poor fairy, held only to be mercilessly consumed by Link? The bottle is truly a most prodigious and flexible item. Above all though, is the bottle's use as a weapon of war. Number 2, Megaton Hammer. This is probably the most contentious item on this list, as the Megaton Hammer is largely considered to be useless. And I get it, it's slow, the range is laughable, and it's totally outclassed by the big Goron sword in basically every meaningful way. But I'll die standing for the Megaton Hammer. I am an absolute Megaton simp. I'm sorry, I'm done now. It looks cool, it's really fun to use. When I can, I'll often use it in replacement of my sword. And when I don't use it, I'll run around carrying it because it looks hella cool. Plus, it can be used to break bombable walls and rocks, so it's basically a bomb that doesn't have an item count. I'll never forget my first time beating Ocarina of Time. I was quite young, so I hadn't yet gotten the big Goron sword. Ganon knocks the Master Sword out of your hand, and young Nehru panics. How will I beat him without my sword? And then I remember, oh faithful, the Megaton Hammer was there for me when the Master Sword was sleeping. All hail the Megaton Hammer. And the best and my favorite item in all of Ocarina of Time is... Number 1, Din's Fire. My favorite item in the entire game is Din's Fire. I'm obsessed with this item. Din's Fire is the reason I basically never have magic in Ocarina of Time, because the moment my meter refills, I begin using Din's Fire at every reasonable opportunity until it's all gone. I love everything about it. It looks the coolest in the inventory screen, and it's a hugely useful item. The ability to just essentially cause a nuke to go off, originating on you and scorching everything in the room is absolutely insane. It can also be used to solve puzzles that involve burning or lighting torches. The best part of the item though is that you get it and can even use it when you're a kid, which is awesome in its own right, but also means that you have access to it for well over half the game. This item is the reason I upgrade my magic bar as soon as I can and carry bottles of green potion. It's not only my favorite item in Ocarina of Time, but easily one of my favorite items in the entire series. And that's my list. I understand it's an unusual and unorthodox list, but hey, variety is the spice of life. Feel free to yell at me about how wrong I am in the comments, but I will stand for no Megaton Hammer hate. Any sentence that contained both the words Megaton and sucks will be deleted. I'm kidding, of course. Probably. What's your list? If you very reasonably don't want to sort all 29 items, drop your top 5 or top 10 in the comments. And while you're at it, give any other lists you agree with a thumbs up. And if you like what I do here, please consider subscribing. If you want to give me video ideas or anything of the like, come join my Discord or follow me on Twitter. Links in the description. Thanks for watching, and remember to be very careful while wandering those streets at night, because, well, it's dangerous to go alone. So, just bring a Megaton Hammer.
Me? Gungaga.